Sorry, give me a sec. I think my mom just put my mom just put a printer on underneath my laptop, so it's hitting.
It's not thriving right now. I also have no idea if that 1 and C is actually 7 minutes long. It might be longer, it might be shorter. I tried to gauge it based off of the last time I gave a speech, but that was a while ago.
That is so fair. I don't think I've even timed the app yet, but I assume it should be short enough.
That's fair.
Okay, I think that should be fine for now.
All right, perfect.
Okay. Let me know whenever you're good.
I am good whenever you are.
Okay, perfect. The resolution call towards debate centered around banning the use of lethal autonomous weapon systems is trapped in a dissuasive symbolic exchange. Debates become soundbites for more and more facts attempting to find the truth of conflict, but instead drives a self-defeating, life-denying, cyclical process of research that becomes the fodder for coercive forms of militaristic control. That's Rivera and 20 dissent is always accompanied in symbolic exchange because he may be disinformation, even when Christian is words kind of drop of vertical reality. Fox News versus CNN, no radical potential for mixing as oppositional said to before against the words of presupposing it still existed back in the question of view, publicly criticizing the images complete as valid, potentially to symbolically extrapolated massive facts that have contributed to scalability of models to expand these raps to be complicit pre-coding a worse asymmetric competence emergent from a model with excessive communication. New knowledge is simply to be integrated. We are gorgeous than against killing us. Another perspective or information does not end violence, but in masses. The oversaturated pile of information once CNN sophistically about every word begets a category for flocks that results in an explosive discourse that makes us less certain about any truth. Cyclically drives us to acquire even more info angles. Self-defeating information devours its own content. It is dissuasive, more locks into the process of information searching debate might be a game, but the resolutional statement about how a statement makes it a new Call of Duty, the form of scenario analysis about risk mitigation and conflict areas. Prove how debate has become a viral mediation of war sense that fuels a theater of conflict production. That's Rivera. 27 with several words in hyper reality information peace conflict the fictitious scenario event or we get a consequence of cyber attack liquid nuclear power plants. But the U.S. can do little to find actions instead. The attack of batches is clear. There's a danger for uncertainty. We must expand the scope of our conflict to compensate the uncertainty of event more real than reality. No longer any particular person or ideology portrayal generates the threat is always imminent. The centralized war response decided by potentiality. No historical analog total electrical grid collapse. The fictor shoulders out of gains maintain integrity of cyber war difficulty for attributing actors viral nature of modern war information as exchange like a virus. No real perpetrator existed. Transcended beyond the second order simulation. The viral mediation has rendered a question of its own existence irrelevant. There is no distinction between military clash war games and symbiotic exchange. Remember that a cyber war hasn't taken place, isn't taking place, and will never take place. So what is the point of the blueprint if not to cultivate a violent form of asymmetric violence? That's Rivera 20 U.S. cyber war interconnects the military strategy reform and model consistently executed without failure. Complete asymmetry over the adversary focus on particular battle mass, the destructive nature of a obscenely specific model. The U.S. national security map and labeled critical infrastructure potentially threatened by cyber attack defend. Forward is an instruction manual for winning the cyber war. New steps and new symbols and steps are constantly added probably onto the excess of meaning and information. Defensive postures have become the principal mission to perfect war by crossing off the each violence of these omnipotent models, abolishing the mysteriousness does not end the violence of war. It allows for one side to all modern conflicts follow this formula, create a blueprint of reality that describes global peace and mass intelligence, preemptively shut down any event that confound the reality. A cyber will never take place. A supposed world that has already been in a simulated object execution with virtual while the new game of deterrence processes all this information. Hostage symbolic exchanges a shared consequence of will to information, our desire to know everything, render every event meaningful, manifest in global. This is not to say that military development of laws is not being planned, but rather the bombardment of simulations, the nature of conflict to desensitize us to the conflict, leaving us with just apathy. That's where we're in 20 some aspects of criticism against cyber wars are real. Some crimes like IP thefts and hacking have happened. Important to clarify what is being argued here. Not insinuating there was no military presence, but war has been envisaged and anticipated that not need to take place. Bombardment of simulations of cyber war has oversensitized us to making panic normal media representations ever more spectacular. Any real cyber event that is not match the level of media representation ever more spectacular. Max level of violence will be met with apathy and denial. A simple generator of haywire will be haywire will feel to be much. Military doctrine has set up to be cyber superiority based on simulations that are ahistorical. The theoretical possibility for a hack that collapses societal assets does not justify the simulation's relationship to reality. Models of debate centered around fiat and hypothetical enacted as a form of technocracy that results in a form of disembodied spectatorship, transforming debate into a virtual chess game where the world is our pawns for the Queen's Gambit. That's Rivera 20 warfare. From a computer, no intention to display the potential brutality of respond neither a pure deterrence or a hot war, but a purgatory between the cyber war embodies the zenith between the disassociating violence of pilot and the simulator conflict. The enemy's water supply or electrical were represented as blips of code, protagonist reforms, military exercises, lack any knowledge of when, where, and if a war will happen, but they still train to command ships, and they are a lifetime away virtual chess game simulation technology, simply visual representation of what was actually being thought. The academy was an illusion that modeled a war of simulation. Teams participated in small skirmishes. They shot non-lethal weapons to train for combat that they knew would never come. The role-playing helps situate the conflict in reality. If a few blackouts or some victims necessary data points keep their war intact, a kind of isolation from the violence allows for unrestrained prosecution. The clinical language we used by cybersecurity experts, such as technocratic abstraction, that it became impossible to grasp perception and lose a sense of reality. Propagation of threats not persuasive if they did not become spectacular. Expert lexicon terms of what offensive military action hide behind the bulwark between media and perception to allow for the population to know the gist without achieving mastery of technocratic language. Like all 21st century conflict that compounds the uncertainty of cyber war, the impact is a militarized information and symbolic violence on a globalized scale. The Rivera 20 closer one becomes a master of the victim, kind of sorry for the reversal, please symbolic victim must stay away from completeness, the free flowing information, exchange of information, and the liberal idea of transparency revealed the horror and stable power until the semiotic exchanges include media attention to cyber war, function of information exchange remains militarized. The images are virtual as a war itself. Media representation of cyber war destined to accumulate obscene violence of the global semiotic exchange that is impossible to describe. Therefore, many contemporary perspectives does vote affirmative to endorse the pataphysical project of mysterization that disrupts the communicative fabric of cybernetic warfare. That's Rivera 20 global violence manifests from the accumulation of meaning. Only regrets abolish just to pursue oppositional challenges, commodification, logic of virtues, nature of commodification. Our strategy must be a weaponization of simulation, reversibility, utmost important, inject meaning to know everything in advance, followed by paradox of irreconcilable confusion. Even a small deceit has potential to cause example, pataphysical reality by creating illusion and deceit to avoid the trap of succumbing to the will to truth, subvert reality by playing with the simulation. Radical thought should not be recognized and analyzed reality, but instead it must deny and contradict its hegemony, take advantage of curiosity and lead them astray, replace the old model with a confused and unreadable one, and to end the violence of predictability, to disrupt the destructive communicative model of cyber war. We must weaponize radical simulation and theoretical terrorism, a shift in our model of communication to pervert the cleanliness of cyber war, to confuse or distort its reality, to collapse. Okay, I have 5 seconds left, so that's chill.
Nice, perfect. All right, you good for cross-ex?
Yeah.
First question, what is the purpose of debate?
That seems like a broad question. I don't know.
What is the purpose of this debate?
We haven't prescribed a universal statement of what debate purpose is, but we have articulated that sort of debate around the question of lethal autonomous weapon systems are bad.
Okay. Is the question for the debates about laws being bad is because they are the main vehicle for cybernetic warfare, or is it something else?
Well, there are 2 warrants that we've isolated. One is sort of the indoctrination into the language of bureaucratic expertise that is substantiated by, I think, the third to last piece of Rivera evidence, which isolates a desensitization impact about the way in which debates over lethal autonomous weapon systems sort of simulate us as a pilot in a cockpit of a drone, where we play with the world as pawns.
I guess, why is that true? Why is hypothetical comparison of potential war scenarios the same thing as piloting a drone?
Well, it's because the way that we become desensitized and distanced from the violence that we sort of talk about.
Why,
right?
I guess, why does the way debate type talks about the hypothetical enactment of potential plans, why does that necessitate desensitization towards, I guess, the impacts of laws?
Well, because the very premise of that question is sort of a hypothetical enactment and the distancing of people as bodies in a game rather than sort of individuals that we relate to, because this is our
I guess
offense about
why
the
is debate that? Like we have a game for ballots, whatever, but why does that mean AFs presented or ACs about questions of laws, drones, etc.? Why does in their hypothetical banning, why does that require a desensitized or unattached approach to those individuals?
Well, the desensitization warrant is one, the sort of repetition of military operates much like the way Call of Duty or other forms of warfare games operate, because the overproliferation of those images creates an affective priming that desensitizes us to the violence. But the other portion is about the distancing we generate to those bodies, i.e., the bodies become sort of people become bodies.
I mean,
right?
neither. Okay,
Impact.
but like we all live in the United States. None of us are at impact of being impacted by drones or whatever. Why is it bad to then discuss that violence? It seems the 1AC discusses it as well. So I guess why do we always have to be desensitized to it?
The argument is that the way in which we have sort of distanced ourselves in forms of traditional scenario analysis and role playing that results in a sort of breakage between the people's lives that we talk about and the way that we analyze them. This distinction becomes important because it's the way that sort of military models understand people as bodies rather than people as people, which is the distinction we are making.
Okay. I just dropped my float. Okay. You have it, correct?
Yeah, let me just pull it up.
Right. It will be one off and then the case. I didn't mean to put that on the screen.
Okay, I think I should be good.
Perfect. I will start then in 3, 2, 1. The office framework and interpretation of the affirmative must make on our offense from the hypothetical enactment of the resolution. Laws are a weapon category. The CRS at 20 laws are a special class of weapon systems that use sensor suits and algorithms to identify a target and destroy without human control. Violation, they defend the resolution as a form of cybernetic breakage. 2 TBAs, 1 ban laws, usage by cyber intelligence institutions solves a massive amount of cybernetic violence. You could read contentions about drone accountability, predictive policing, algorithmic bias, etc. Second, ban laws for intelligence purposes. It would undermine the entirety of military usage of laws. Both avoid kind of the military calculation or desensitization impacts that they discuss with the Rivera evidence. B is our offense. They destroy engagement, predictable station search, research, accessibility, and negative ground. Even if public policy isn't the best focus for activism, it's a crucial dialogue because it's grounded, consistent reporting, and academic work. So 2 impacts. First, changing the topic post-factual structurally favors the app by manipulating the balance of prep. Vote negative because debate is a competitive game that's meaningless without substantive constraints. Second, also key to have a well-prepared opponent. Exclusionary rule. They transform debate into a monologue, which means their arguments are presumptively false because they haven't been subjected to well-deserved research scrutiny. Their model creates a structural disincentive to substantial research. Failure to defend the accurate mechanism of the resolution allows them to shift their advocacy in terms of the most favorable to them. That causes dogmatism and forces the negative generics at the margins of the literature. It destroys good scholarships, which reproduces all kind of the distancing impacts that they discuss. Procedural rules in the game are distinct from the university's will to mastery. Transgressing the rules to destroy debate can never solve it. Gains satisfaction from violating the system. It indicts with reifies the coherence of the system. Breaking the rules isn't disruptive because you already voted and agreed to submit to them in the first place. You should instead vote negative because voting for top county for no other reason than the sake of rule guided games divest the rules of their any authority. This is the best way of exposing the contradictions of the outside world outside of debate. That's Björk. And 11, the law stands for social regularity. The law consists not only of norms and carries justification. The law tells us not only what we should and should not do, it also tells us why the game and the rule are characterized by arbitrariness. The rule is pure evident to the game. The rule does not give reasons for why they should follow the rule. The game is dependent on voluntary submission. We live within the law, but even when fantasizing its abolition for the discourse of the law determines the inverse discourse of transgression. The game moves beyond the ideological domain of the law. It does not hold the promise of satisfaction. Entering the game means voluntarily submitting to the arbitrary rule of no higher meaning, that is delivering oneself from the law. Transgression is cut in the law is nature to satisfaction, unsatisfaction. We may contradict the explicit word of the law, but we're still confirming its principle. When choosing to submit to the rules, we renounce our desire by letting ourselves be seduced, but in order to not promising any satisfaction, we move beyond the law. We have no illusions about the game. Is nothing but the illusion one neither believes nor disbelieves a rule. One observes it desire suspended. So is unsatisfaction in the law. We may find partial satisfaction through attainment of different objectives in the joy. The game says not from this, but from suspension. People play games because it's fun rather than providing a full explanation. Fun seems to mark the limitation of the explanation. Fun resist the interpretation. The subject can never find satisfaction in missing his object. The next best thing is winning and losing and being contradictory to project intentionality into again the rule functions of parodic simulacra of the law on an immediate level. The rules look like the rule lacks the phantasmic support of the ideology the game presents. The rule in naked arbitrariness. The game may transform our way the particular law subtraction of the ideology may make us aware of the ideological dimension of the law carrying us to view the law in the same naked arbitrariness of the rule. The rule mimics the law, does not pretend to be law, and neither the repression, the absence of justification, transcending the rule provides a vacuum around the game. The game does not explain itself, merely offers the game does not pass judgment on the law. However, the vacuum produced by the rule and devoid of ideology opens the potential for critical reflections. These cannot be made within the game. The game merely opens the space case. The role of the judge is to determine who wins the debate. The battle should go to whoever wins more often. The framework is arbitrary and self-serving. Vagueness and lack of coherent weighing mechanisms mean the AF wins every time. And lethal autonomous weapons role is de-escalating, prevents nuclear war. The planned research method prevents it. That's umbrella. At all 19 laws can strike with greater precision or sharpness. The laws is apparent in the U.S. drugs proliferation laws. Different laws are capable of becoming more without intervention. Laws can never be cheaper than UAVs and proliferation, but this not be desirable given the ethical laws will never glorify or accident wars and emotional volatility of humans can lead to overspending high deaths towards growing use of UAVs to keep consistent with high precision weaponry. That way, construction weapons like the nukes, they are a reason for welcoming the shift. Laws reduce the probability of indiscriminate harm. Easy of use of law prevents conflict, providing credible retaliation, precision, and effectiveness of laws. Accelerating nuclear disarmament and seeing that laws are capable of conventional rather than non-conventional. The nukes could initiate nuclear winter cause global act failure, starvation, disease, and catastrophic sequelae. Laws provide winter state deterrence by providing states with retaliation without nuclear conflict. The laws to render the world's nuclear arsenal is relevant and lower the risk of annihilation. And America needs more strategic planners. Lack of public engagement with the military details and cost-benefit calculations cements poor strategies to the increase. This is interventions turns the entirety of the that's Bolton. And 17 American military strategy needs to engage the public to demand genuine strategy. We don't have a supply problem. We have a demand problem created by poor strategy. We have a military doing missions beyond its purview. The areas not qualified military professionals must demand clear goals. Army, Air Force, and Navy outnumber the other countries. DOD spends more. The next powers providing money is not the solution. Unclear strategy allows us to ignore hard choices. Our policies are exacerbating instability. We provide to prevent attacks and only state further violence. Our forces are effective, but no matter how effective the military is, tactical levels, the strategy of the political framework was flawed result of defeat. We need a strategy that values defense needs against a harsh system of resources, but we need rarely to align to policy strategies discussed have been politicized national consensus usually ignored because the public bears little to direct cost. Few leaders are certainly not. The public ask what exactly are we doing, and yet you says we to ask the basic question: we doom ourselves to continue policies that may not work. Only with proper realistic strategy can we align our national means and strategic ends in order to cease using our military as a national band-aid. And the LAIO is not dead in the water. That is a myth that realists tell America to keep us from committing to our unique role as a hegemon. Alliances are good. They're key to check vicious powers like China and prevent global conflict spirals. Educational commitments are the crucial internal link. That's Kagan. In 21, Kilpatrick argued the U.S. should return to being normal nation, normal interests, give them to dubious benefits to superpower status. Did not mean preserving the balance of power within Europe or Asia, permitting democracy or taking responsibility for problems of the world. This is a continental perspective. The problem the U.S. has not been a normal nation, nor has it never been normal interests. This gives unique power from gives unique world rule. The world order becomes the U.S. is concerned when the old world order class in the country becomes the old power capable of establishing a new one. This is still the case today, and yet continentalism remains dominant. It informs the language Americans use to talk about foreign policy and theoretical paradigms by which they understand such a remind mains to boost with the moralism called for restraint to claim it's act betrayals and active hubris and imperialism and nationalist belief what they regard as an unwarranted excess of American powers the greatest obstacle to a better war. Violence treat every war from Vietnam to Iraq as if the equivalent of the final act of folly. An entire generation of Americans grown up believing that a lack of clear-cut victories proves that the country can no longer accomplish anything. The world, the rise of China, the U.S. is declining share of the economy and advance of new tech and diffusion of power all have signaled the tideway of the order. Yet, if the U.S. were as weak, it wouldn't have to practice restraint. The earth is around. The U.S. sits on the vast isolated continent. Other great powers living regions crowded and would be victims to so look to U.S. for help. The Trump years were a stress test. The U.S. allies had various appeased and cajoled the adversary trod carefully. Many of Trump's policies were erratic and ill-conceived, but they did show how much excess and unused power the U.S. has. The U.S. is now in a peace mode. Were the Americans to shift the war footing in response to Chinese action, the U.S. would look very different. The question is not whether the U.S. is capable of prevailing in confrontation with China or any other revisionist power. The question is whether the worst kind of hostilities can be avoided, whether China and other powers can be encouraged to pursue aims peacefully. The U.S. cannot avoid avoiding such by continuing adherence to the 19th century view. Doing would produce periods of indifference and retrenchment would be followed by fear, panic. Now already Americans are torn between the two impulses. China now occupies the place in American mind that Germany once held. On the other hand, many Americans believe the U.S. is in decline and that China will dominate Asia. The danger is now that Beijing ramps up Americans will start to panic. It is times like these that miscounts are made when whether Americans have left less remain to be seen. Oscillation will be difficult to change, especially when experts of all stripes regard support for a liberal world order as an impossible and immoral. Neither history nor circumstances justify idealism. The alternate to American world order is not a Swedish world order. Marked as Swedish world order. I am good for cross whenever you are. Also, I love all the Wake swag. Go Deeks.
Oh, I've been muted. LOL, my bad.
All good.
Yeah, I just came back from campus tour and I'm like super in love with it. So
Love it. Love it.
Sorry, so the first question I was asking was, which part of the Kagan card do you think isolates the internal link between educational spaces and hegemony?
It's the, hold on, let me point to the line. It's the portion where it's discussing how many academics as well as individuals believe that we need to call for restraints, that the US has only acted out of hubris and imperialism, and that the US is, or that calls for maintaining the liberal international order are immoral or wrong. Our argument and Kagan's argument, his literal article, is a call on academics and students to reinfuse our kind of support for military planning, strategic planning, in order to prevent kind of not only a degradation of the relationship between kind of civilian populations and military planners to, you know, prevent like military isolation and mistakes from being made, but also to kind of calm calls for aggressive action against actors like China.
So I get that. My question then is, your evidence seems to be articulating a response to a growing chorus of academics who are anti-hegemonic. So I'm asking about then, where do you generate link uniqueness?
The Kagan evidence argues that the issue is not that America is actually declining. The US still has a massive amount of power. That's why there would have to be a call for restraint, and instead infusing academia with the moralism towards support through things like scenario planning, et cetera, is good. If you are right about your internal link, that traditional hypothetical modes of debate eventually create an academic space that is in support and allows for military experimentation, we say that that is good because it supports
I understand
for that.
I'm curious about what is the threshold of academic discourse that needs refusal, because I get the part about hegemony being sustainable now, but your evidence also has made a claim that academics are already speaking out against hegemony. So what is the link threshold necessary to cause this
I
sort
guess
of impact?
it's not like, you know, we have like 10 academics in support and 8 are on the brink or whatever, like in a typical dissent sense, but rather Kagan isolates that preventing a vacuum of discussion, a vacuum from appearing where discussions are currently happening, where people are willing to defend the liberal and national order. We think that students should not be told that that is immoral or wrong.
Okay. I guess which part of do you think? Never mind. The framework debate, the Bjorg evidence, I've understood this to be list a sort of fun impact. Anything I'm missing out of this / external impact of Bjorg?
It's definitely not a fun impact. It's a turn to your understanding of the relationship between gameplay and kind of the detached reality that you discussed. In fact, Baudrillard would agree that the detached reality that is produced through gameplay is necessary to rupture kind of the belief that debate activism could happen. So the best way to articulate the strategy of the app would to read a topical plan text with the same Rivera cards, to read one of the TVAs.
I'm going to start some prep now.
How much prep is in LD?
I think 5.
5, okay. Gotcha. I'm gonna go fill my water. Be right back. Just realized I never turned my camera back on when I got back. My bad.
Okay, yeah, no worries. It's I think I have how much time left? 350 left. And the order will be case, then framer.
It's 4 minutes for this one, right?
Yeah.
And is there a doc or no?
Yeah, there are 3 cards I'll send. Or
Perfect.
yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay. Cool. I just uploaded it to Discord.
Perfect. I am good.
Okay, awesome.
Debate might be a game, but it's a war game that simulates the military planet's fight against a global war against others.
1 sec. There's something on Word that was just glitching. Sorry.
Okay,
I'll read it.
you can restart, yeah.
Debate might be a game, but it's a war game that simulates a military planet's fight against a global war against others. There are 2 internal links that take out all their offense. One is that debate and militaristic institutions are intimately tied, shown by CIA fighting about or terrorism, doing more information to sway taking a stance on yes laws or no laws. The CNN versus Fox News proliferating more and more oppositional information leads to mystification, preventing action, which is the impactor to both framework and hegemony, because the drive for truth is not progressive, but rather expand military laws look at ammunition for gentle relationship towards others. That's where 1 and 2 conceding information dissuasive takes out every internal link about any aspects of those offices they want to try to go for, or any sort of reason for why hegemony is good, because it precludes an ability for us to come to that conclusion, but rather turns the spectators. Secondly, debate desensitizes us from material violence. We treat people as books of information to play with rather than to take action. Bureaucratic debates about laws result in semantics and abstraction, making action impossible. This makes the Karl Roman doctrine and militarize subjectivity with no valid life after pure concept of analysis. That's Rivera. 3 and 4, putting affirmative towards the panophysics and refusal of model of communication or the resolution. Affirmative about ruptures, repetition, compulsion of topical debates means that I don't need to win a counter debate. The framework arguments generate uniqueness for the impact turns. So, hedge debate. There's no link. We haven't made a critique of broader American foreign policy, but a critique of a computerized warfare simulation. They have an epistemic bias to construct in order for the United States to have something securitized against. This justifies themselves to be this justifies the form of endless war against the other and with anyone that has access to the internet becomes potential threat. This self-defeating process makes the conditions for a dramatic collapse inevitable. Think of Afghan war. We funded the Taliban to fight the Russians, but then had to intervene to destroy the terrorists we created, which is proof of why we're a snake chasing our own tail. Second, over impact during the process of impact calculus, the DA presumes desensitizes from all because of the over-proliferation of violence makes apathetic spectators that justifies sort of genocide in the long run. Third, there's no link unique. The evidence is the content of status quo academic discourse that are anti-hegemonic. Seriously, this guy has been a hack since 1998, who's isolated that a growing course of anti-hegemony has been happening in the status quo, which there's no threshold for how much of the affirmative would uniquely link cake in 98. The core currents of anti-hegemony and discourse that America thinks seriously kills our purpose, Vietnam, liberals, academic, ever consider Buckley, nationalized guarantee crying hubris. This is during the isolation in America today, moved that I see conflict the view of many among Europeans and Americans, modeling on much than everyone else's business, taking too little time to find its own. Fourth hedge is dead and nothing can reverse the trend shadow. Towards liberal down the face and Washington ability to maintain as military super US off the challenge every debate is built like our people operate freely that the air and around cyberspace. New decades of metrics are the limited ability to find strike targets, safe and force and abroad trafficking, see control communication, protect our whole planet. Nothing is likely to work as a trans framework. What is he with an impact on a framework? I got a case. What is he? We preempted framework. What is he? There was insurance class 2 often inevitable. We just do the AC and ARs and impact on the don't perceive the fault just because he didn't answer back the question whether research from the like did no brother for habit chasing no putting a person he first the five first and the turn demand impact on the bad for truth and pat 70 to set five first and link impact on the clashing whether or not laws are good bad turn the education office because we get trapped in this code so you can never take action between there's only risk of arcs and office of military scholarship second democracy decide second internal like athlete debate over lost truth in the language and cybersecurity experts that details that's from mouth debate the same lexicon cultivation how pulse because like our road TV doesn't solve our impact turns to the form of topical debate but be proof that we are predictable they should have got counter interpretation of version of an orientation towards communication about lethal autonomous weapon systems solve predictability based upon the legal activity and questions about how we relate to the space or into the activity like will be rapidly be predictable because about how deliberation of the cognitive resolution plan on the teams and heavily have to reach that predictability determined by community norm that putting for interpretation in the long run makes it more predictable solves limited to as massive velocity every time asked about infinite text that has to be generated creates spec states where weapon we limit to solely question about how we communicate orient ourselves to the resolution we limit out of perfect that aren't about communication or resolution but excludes their case of fairness as a sliding deal out of our question means they have to qualify fairness losses out with offense procedural fairness only matters as far as they win the game which is basically but if I when an impact or an takes it out it's a considered non-intrinsic good i.e. flowing line violent etc or not violent but we critique the resolution form of resolution of the impact of clash how much enough B doesn't turn off until we win the ballot if we win or turn a ballot repetition compulsion offense on case C even if we don't create new education preventing clash from the resolution is good by the fourth internal link the skills argument is the impact by the info displays stuff the breaking the rules argument is incorrect we've read updates of Vidrid in the context of war making about cyber computerized warfare which we prefer our bad or revert and give the example of students engaging form scenarios analysis about military planning creating a dispatch fascination with volunteers the attack critique of the simulation of reality that Butchert is indicted.
I will take the prep now then. I believe that was time. I'm going to do framework and then case.
Sorry, can you repeat the order?
Framework and then case.
Okay, cool.
Small overview on framework and then just kind of straight down. Let me know when you are good.
I'm good.
All right, perfect. Debate is a competitive research game centered on a tournament structure and a multitude of topics that were voted on and discussed in advance by the community. We are at the last tournament of many people's career and an extremely important one for many others with the best teams in the country, each of whom has an incentive to craft the most strategic app. The only meaningful constraint on any of this process is topicality. It determines the literature base we are researching and clashing over. It determines the controversy in which arguments have the best chances of winning. Under their model of debate, the app fundamentally gets to decide those contours with no concern for negative participation. Its only way to equalize structural inequities and access deficiencies by forcing teams to debate over a limited and balanced controversy we all know exists. Ask yourself, how much ground does the negative get under their interpretation? What kinds of links will be granted? Don't rely on the goodwills of two ways. The most strategic app defends next to nothing, which is what they incentivize. Now, here's all we are saying is that you should have not burned the negative with having to debate what they have said. It's not that they've said or done anything wrong. It's just unreasonable to set the bar for the negative that high, which means you should hold all their informatic scrutiny stuff to a high level of skepticism, because they have no proof that debate has to require things like empathetic detachment or desensitization in order for debaters to win, or it proves that detachment's the only way to solve that, because they have made the other impact that the CIA and other institutions are invested in debate because we aren't so detached, because we understand the intricacies of laws, etc., which proves that more detachment inevitably is good, because not only does it solve the multitude of the app, but it prevents the creation of the same CIA agents that they say are bad. Now, their subjectivity arguments are not an argument. Subjectivity is not shaped by individual debates. Sure, ballots over time may change our political subjectivity, orientation, ethics, etc., but certainly no one debate has that power. This should act as internal defense to all of their offense. It should be a sufficient condition for you to vote negative on presumption. Remember, debate isn't about being right about your literature, about being your opponents by debating better. Only our model solves that, where theirs model requires a revealing of the truth. Now, the counter-interpretation proper. First, it's arbitrary and self-serving. There's no way to accurately define what a political communication about laws would entail. It explodes limits because teams couldn't easily say they're topical enough. We'd have to prepare for things like an app about death and the fear of laws policies to embrace the bomb, and app about querying the laws by encouraging terrorist surveillance assemblages. The laws bans are a neoliberal app, a narrative about lack of laws regulation causing pollution in impoverished countries. None of these are bad subjects to debate about. In many ways, to be incorporated into topic proposals. The problem is when the app departs from that topical proposal, becomes impossible to refute the app in a stable fashion, since it's impossible to prepare for all the possible permutations of each important subject somehow related to the resolution. It also proves it's entirely counterproductive in the context of our limits arguments, because it lets the app pick and choose what they want to defend and forces the negative, only debating parts of the app. The whole point is that you need to be accountable for the entire affirmative, otherwise the iterative benefits of debate aren't actualized, and it results in the same technocracy type of logic that they criticize. Prefer interpretation. It limits discussions around laws to how weapon systems are deployed and utilized, which is more effective at actually tracking military usage and how they're deployed. Our bulletin evidence on case proves that it is good. I'll do that there. The TBAs solve the rest of the app. There's two of them that go conceded. The first, it bans laws used by cyber and intelligence institutions, which is able to solve kind of the broad usage and idea that war games are still something that is done with technical expertise, or that's not something we should trust. And second is the banning use of laws for intelligence purposes, which undermines the entire militaristic use of laws, which is the basis for cybernetic warfare in the first place. None of these things are tracked in kind of the Rivera's evidence of form was a desensitization. You can have things like narratives that justify the reason for voting out, which means they have no offense to it. The technocracy dissent doesn't apply to it. Debate is a game that's able to solve it, and it prevents detachment, which I described above. Now, we have a massive limits dissent to their model of debate. Every argument is inherently a problematic assessment about one's best path to victory, assuming from the onset that your argument is the only one that can win it is bad. In order to engage, you have to be willing to lose design your 1AC in ways that can be negated, even if they have a high risk if that every 2A has an incentive to hide those flaws in their FCA performance. The negative model of resolution allows for links that allow still for negative criticism. Only our model of debate breeds epistemic humility, which requires the process of losing and recognizing you don't have all the answers to the world's problems, which is key to preventing hijacking from actors like the CIA. The Bureau of Evidence turns the rest of their offense at the top level example, if the debate is a game and information is inherently dissuasive, their call for a debate allows debate to kind of transform their project into another authority that allows the CIA to co-opt their project for itself. Baudrillard's whole thing is that the only way to prevent this is to arbitrarily submit oneself to things like game rules in the face of violent laws in order to debase those laws of their power. It's the only way to destroy debate and prevent the detached reality that happens through hypothetical scenario analysis. It allows us to understand that wargaming is something that is violent and something that should not be that our political officials should be doing, because they should be accountable to the individuals that they represent, which proves that only our model of debate is able to solve if they win any of their top level stuff. Now, the AC proper, I'm only going to go for a couple arguments. I'm going to concede that there's no link to hegemony, as well as there's no link uniqueness. This has a couple implications for a lot of the AF offense. One, it proves that they have no uniqueness for the voting AF. It proves that a military industrial complex in academia is collapsing in the status quo. The AF is not necessary to do it, and there's only a risk that they create and more fascination or grounds for reviving them from hacks like Keegan. Second, our evidence indicates that, or the Bolton evidence indicates that the military industrial complex requires individuals to understand kind of how war games are detached in the status quo. That's only possible through our model debate, as per the Bureau evidence and how it's described, which proves that we only have uniqueness to be able to solve the rest of their AF. The last argument is that they make a bunch of arguments about Karl Rove, etc., are inevitable forms of hypothetical enactment of debate. There's no falsifiable reason to prove that Karl Rove is uniquely a product of things like traditional policy debate. There's just or traditional LD debate. It's more likely that good people are also produced from it, which means that you shouldn't hold us accountable to listing off examples of bad people who debate. Rather, you should defer to our evidence as well as a model debate that is able to actualize the benefits that we get out of any of our arguments. If we win that the counter temptation is unlimited, it proves that they're not able to solve the vast majority of our offense. / we should not be held accountable for negating things like information being dissuasive, because there was no possibility of negating the AF in the first place, because it was unpredictable for the neg to predict in the first place, because it was never about the question of banning laws, which is the only thing that you should be accountable for. My allergies got the best of me at the end of there.
Okay, cool. So I think I have 350 left.
Correct.
Starting at 10. Okay, cool. And the order will be case, then framework.
Perfect. Give me 1 second to send an email, and I will be ready.
Yeah, sounds good.
Perfect. Okay. Sorry, I just had to let the TOC know that I'm missing 1 round because I'm traveling.
Okay. No worries.
If debate is a game that's a war game, if you will chess out war against others, I'm going to go for the first half internal language slack, the specificities that on framework conceded. Uniqueness claim that debate is being infiltrated by the CIA, proven by them funding and tampering and monitoring Zoom questions about the truth of legal trials, weapon systems gets co-opted by military institutions like the CIA. My Rivera evidence isolate how academia deputize the debaters to produce more and more information, which gets used as cannon fodder to expand the scope of military models. This process of information gathering allows for the Pentagon to feel more confident in the military models and emboldened to engage in genocidal incursions across the globe. This means to try or die for our model debate that forces a discussion about whether or not our communicative practice is good or not, because our communicative model gets exported outwards, which means that it's not just a form of tacit game playing, but rather has material impact outside of the space, which they have conceded. Instead, vote affirmative to refuse the communicative model of computerized warfare that the resolution mandate. They've conceded rejecting framework as absolvency because they're ruptures the repetition of topical debate and precludes the sort of class and a system of military institutions. The uniqueness trick is wrong because yes, academia broadly might be collapsing the military-industrial complex, but our uniqueness claim is about the CIA infiltration into debate as distinct from broader academia. This is our uniqueness. The outside of the debate, militarism is collapsing, but the topic is trying to prop it up. Ergo, vote affirmative to refuse the topic's instantiation of military paradigms. The Bolton argument is incorrect because it is the detachment office is not the office I'm going to go for, but they've conceded that topical clash is co-opted by the CIA and the status quo, which is why I tried to voting affirmative. They're not going for a shape and subjectivities argument, but rather a broader co-option argument by other institutions. Framework debate. Tournament framework flips affirmative. It's the TOC and the success of arguments in reaching finals is viewed by the entire community and shapes how broader discussion taking place. Proven by the success of feeds like McDougall and New Brand policy rate of proliferation of discussion of alternative approaches. If you always try or die for a refusal of the topic conceding, the debate has become co-opted by CIA and discussion of laws gets immobilized for a genocidal project means that we have said the game of debate is not worth preserving and a risk of a globalized warfare outweighs any nebulous impact of fairness or clash. I do get a case. They've conceded 2 wars. One is the one he was already a critique of resolution means there's an intrinsic clash between both positions and they should be waiting for that. Second is often inevitable as you see the AC and the AR as a response to T, and we just started the debate earlier. Debate as the game framing matters if they win the debate is good, but that begs the question of all the AC offers me the cap in the prior question to framework. They say ground loss, but we have impact on the ground that you've lost because those sort of clash about whether or not legal and weapon systems are good or not is what we said is bad. The counter-interpretation affirmative must have been an orientation towards communication about legal autonomous weapon systems, solves predictability, consider debate as a communicative activity question of how we ought to orient ourselves communicatively is a prior lexical question. B, but it's predictable because it's about how deliberation, the context of the resolution play out, which means teams that have to research it, which means you should have had grounded, but it's just back to the question why your research model is bad. Solves limits. The status quo is massive. Allows for teams to read sci-fi apps about infinite tech that hasn't been created spec states or weapons, and we limit the topic to solely question of how we communicatively orient ourselves to the resolution with flimps and back unique to the limits said, but they've also considered that their model also links to the limits said, but the only difference is that they get a clash by reading laws good, which we impact turn seeing it results in sort of genocidal incursion, which means you should back the question why this nebulous. In fact, the limits outweigh the TV doesn't solve because we said jettisoning the ground you would usually read against those affirmatives is good. The Bjorg evidence is incorrect because we have made an argument about why debate is not just sort of tacit game playing, but rather is utilized by broader institutions to justify militaristic incursion and absent impact that outweighs the affirmative. You cannot vote negative.
Yay, debate. So I have just a couple comments and stuff that I think we can go through about this, but do you want that in the recording or I just don't know if I can make 2 separate recordings on Zoom. So.
Either is fine. I don't have a real preference because it's not going up until after the TOC.
Perfect. I'll pause it then, and then I'll just send you the thoughts again if you have them. So see you later, YouTube.